Welcome to COMET-Farm tutorials. Today we're going to be talking about creating scenarios. COMET-Farm provides a unique opportunity to compare carbon changes and greenhouse gas emissions between your current management practices and future scenarios. This video is only focused on inputting future scenarios. In this example, you can see that we've just completed filling in all of our baseline data. So we have the years 2000 to 2022 filled in with a crop rotation of corn, soybean, and alfalfa. When looking at our management, you'll notice that we have intensive tillage events and that we are applying fertilizer. So there are a couple different ways that we can go about starting our future scenario. The first is we can go to our last year in the baseline, so 2022, and we can go to our last management input, which is burning. And because those are the last pieces of information we'll need to enter, you can scroll down and hit next, and you'll be prompted to enter a future scenario. However, another way you can do that is you can go to really any year or any management piece in your baseline, and you can just click skip ahead at the bottom. Here you'll be prompted to ask if you want to add an additional crop for the year that you've selected. In this case, we already have corn, soybean, and alfalfa, so I'm going to go ahead and just click no thanks, continue. Next, I'm going to be prompted to copy management from my current year to any other years, but again, my baseline is set up just the way I want it right now. All of those squares with a red outline indicate that there's already data entered, so I'm going to say no thanks. Then I'm going to get another pop-up saying that all data for all parcels for all years have been entered, and I can continue to a future scenario, or I can keep editing. Again, here we have everything the way we want, so I'm going to continue to future management. Here I'm going to be prompted to name my future management scenario. You want to keep the name short and sweet, but you also do want it to clearly refer to what management style you're using. In my case, I'm going to switch from intensive tillage to no-till, so I'm going to name the scenario no-till. This next part is super important. You'll see a checkbox below that says copy management information from current management. This is a really valuable tool if you're only changing one or two parts of your management, such as from intensive to no-till. That way you don't have to manually enter all that same data over again. However, if you're implementing an entirely new crop rotation, entirely new practices, then I'd recommend starting from scratch. In our case, we're just adjusting the tillage, so I'm going to check that box and then click continue. As you can see in the navigation pane at the top, we're now in scenario management, and when you scroll down, you'll see all of your years of your future management are auto-filled with that rotation of soybean, alfalfa, and corn. It also means that our management practices are going to be the same. So again, you see that intensive tillage under the soybean, and again, intensive tillage under corn as well. So here we want to go ahead and start switching from intensive to no-till. I'm going to go ahead and navigate back over to my first year of soybean and to the tillage pane. And I'm going to switch that tillage from intensive to no-till because that's going to be our new future management practice. I want to make sure this is consistent across the entire year, so I'm also going to check on the tillage for the alfalfa, and I see that that is still intensive tillage, so I'm going to switch that as well because we want to make sure that we're consistent across all crops, all years. Once I've done that, I can navigate down to skip ahead. It's going to ask if I'd like to add an additional crop, and I don't want to. However, I am going to copy management from 2023 to 2029 because I have the same management and same crops for soybean and alfalfa, and it's easiest to just copy those over rather than have to go and manually implement the practices again. Here it's going to ask if I'm ready to run my report, and I have not finished modifying all the practices, so I'm going to say no thanks. One thing I like to do afterwards is go ahead and check that 2029 year and make sure that the practice did indeed get copied over, and I see no tillage, so that is a good sign. Next, I'll go ahead and check management under 2024. Alfalfa does not have tillage events implemented, so that means that we can go ahead and skip over that, but I do like to check just to make sure. And again, 2025, no tillage. That means I can probably skip down to corn, which we do know had intensive tillage in our baseline. And once again, I'm going to switch that over to no tillage. If I really want to cover my bases, I can also navigate down and double check the alfalfa in the end of my future scenario. And again, there's no tillage event, so I'm going to click skip ahead. Again, I don't want to add an additional crop. I do not need to copy the corn to any other year because there's only one rotation, so I'm going to click no thanks. And now I have the option to run my report or create a new scenario. And in this case, I'm going to create a new scenario using a new technique to show you. Similar to before, you're going to get a pop-up window asking to name your new scenario. And this time I'm going to create a no-till scenario using the conservation practices button. One cool feature of COMET-Farm is now when you create a second scenario, you have the option to copy management from either your baseline or a different future scenario, such as our no-till scenario. So if you wanted to add in a practice in addition to no-till, you could select to copy information from no-till and add in that secondary management practice. Another important thing about this window is you'll have three options: to drag and drop crop rotation, to add a conservation practice, or to create a new scenario. And these options are all independent of one another, and you cannot do more than one of them. So as an example, you can't both add a conservation practice here and then create a new scenario manually, nor can you drag and drop a crop rotation and create a scenario manually. These are all or options, so you can only choose one, and trying to do multiple will wipe out the information from the one you input first. Soon we'll have another tutorial up that describes these features in more detail, but today I just wanted to give you a quick glimpse at the option to add conservation practices. When you first open this window, you'll see a list of different conservation practices, such as converting to reduced or no tillage, adding cover crops, strips and borders, stuff like that. It's important to note that a limitation of the tool currently is that you can only select one of these conservation practices at a time. So even though the buttons here look like check marks, you can only select one. In our case, we're going to use this feature to convert to no-till, so I'll select that. Once I've selected that, I can scroll all the way down to the bottom of this window and I can click Add. Here we have a couple options to either continue editing, add another conservation practice, or continue to the report. Because it's so automated, I'm going to go ahead and just continue to the report so that you guys can see the results. But in other cases, you're welcome to continue editing to check over and make sure that practice was input correctly. The process of running a report can take a couple minutes. If you've created an account, you're welcome to navigate away from that page while it's running and then come back when it's ready. This is what it'll look like once it's complete. You'll see that we have both of our management scenarios, no-till, which we implemented manually, and then the no-till scenario that we entered using the Add Conservation Practices feature. You'll be able to compare your emissions across these scenarios, and we'll be creating another video about how to interpret these reports, which you can find on our YouTube channel. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to visit the Help widget, which has a lot of frequently asked questions, or you can email us at appnrel@colostate.edu. Thank you.